Hey guys, today's religion lesson is a study of Saint Dominic de Guzman. So this is our Saint Dominic, and Angie the white cat is here, obviously, to yell at me as I'm trying to do this. So we are going to do the study of Saint Dominic. You probably watched the movie, and if you're not, I'm going to give you a little recap on his life. We are going to look at some of the parts of the art that people include with him. So there is iconography in art, and that means that in paintings and in pictures of certain saints and certain holy people, we include other icons in the picture in order to help us understand the importance of the character. So here we have a couple different things shown in the picture. So you need this one. You will also need some crayons. I'm going to use those. I think it would probably be okay to use markers, but I'm always afraid that I won't be able to erase them. So let me tell you a little bit about St. Dominic before we begin. So you probably know that he is the founder of the Order of Preachers, and that those are the priests that are at our St. Dominic Church. They are the descendants of the original Order of Preachers from St. Dominic in the year 1200, so a long, long time ago. Okay, so you should know that St. Dominic was born, when he was born to a lord and a lady of a manor. His mother was St. Jane de Aza, and she was a very holy and religious woman in herself. And his father was very rich and very good, and they supported St. Dominic. Now, St. Dominic is known for tackling something difficult. During his time, and even now, people are confused about the message of God, and sometimes they see things that are happening in the world and they try to make sense of it, and they think, oh, this must be God telling me this. But they're not spending time to really think about the messages that we've heard from God. So there was a group of people called the Albigensians. The Albigensians were a set of people that St. Dominic went to visit. And the reason why he visited them is because they believed that in order to be loved by God, you had to be perfect. And perfect meant living in austerity. Austerity means to live very humbly and very poor. And they believed that only a certain level of person could live with this austerity, and everyone else who didn't live in that way was awful and evil. And so they believed that if you didn't live in austerity, you were evil. And if you didn't live the way they did, you were evil. And St. Dominic went to them and said, no, that's not the way it works, that God loves us all. And one of the ways that he approached them, because lots of people had tried to go and tell the Albigensians this same thing, was he said, I need to show them that I can live in austerity, I can live in a humble way, and go to them and still believe in the love and the care of others who don't live in the same way that I do. And so he often wore very plain clothing, such as a black robe and a white underrobe. And he often wore sandals or no shoes upon his feet to show that he lived in a humble way. Okay. St. Dominic, fun fact, was known to be a friend of St. Francis of Assisi. And that's really special for us because we celebrate St. Francis coming up in October, in the beginning of October. And they often traveled together, and they believed in similar things. And the Franciscan priests and nuns now are known to be friends with the Dominican priests and nuns of even now. Okay. Something that I just read, so I did a little bit of research before I did this. I just want to make sure I got things somewhat correct here, guys. I read, and this is something that's really neat, that really struck me. The paper says that St. Dominic was so gentle and so known for his gentleness that anyone who came to speak with him, even if they were looking to absolve their sins, they went away happier. That he was so gentle to them and spoke so kindly to them that they felt better. And what a wonderful, I imagine that this is how Jesus was. That, he would talk to tax collectors and people who have committed all these kinds of sins, and they would go away feeling better about themselves. And that he never took the time to reproach them or to speak poorly to them, but instead took of an opportunity to change their heart towards God. So pretty special guy. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to color in different parts of St. Dominic, and I'm going to tell you about why that the parts of his picture are there. So why don't we start with the most unique part of this picture, and that is this puppy dog. And so I am going to color in my puppy dog and my torch. I'm actually going to pause now and color in my puppy dog and my torch, but that's it. And I'd like you to do the same thing and meet me back here in a moment. Now, I did forget to say this, so I apologize. So I'm going to say it now, and it looks like it came right afterwards, whatever. You have to make do. I used to sometimes create icons with Mrs. Alexander, who you may not know, but she used to work at St. Dom's, and she does icons with her mother, and they do very important paintings. And when you do an icon, you want to make sure that you are in a prayerful space, because you can connect with the person that you are decorating, you are coloring, you are painting, by taking that time to be quiet and reflective as you're doing so. So as I tell you a little bit about these different parts of St. Dominic, make sure you're kind of in a reflective mood, and you're in a mood where you can connect to St. Dominic and the messages that come from him. So in this picture, we have a dog and a torch or a flame. Now, this comes from a legend. In the legend, St. Dominic's mother was pregnant with St. Dominic, and she had a dream. In the dream, she gave birth to a puppy dog who carried a torch in his mouth, and the torch would burn the world. It is suggested that St. Dominic was represented as a dog in her dream, because dogs are steadfast and strong and trustworthy, and they continue on, and they're they don't allow things to stop them in their pursuit. And the light here, the torch, is actually the light of God. And so this is St. Dominic bringing the light of God to the whole world, setting the world on fire with the love and the light of God. Okay, so the next part we're going to look at is we're going to be coloring in his tonsure here. So his tonsure is the outside robe, and that is black. And the reason why it is black is, if you remember, he believed in austerity. He believed in living humbly. Not that that was the only way to live, but that's how he chose to connect to God. And so he lived he wore very humble clothing. And so just be careful that you can see that I'm taking the time to outline this so that I make sure I get the robe as black, the tonsure as black. And now, as soon as I've got this all filled in, and you can see his robe is down here as well by the dog. Okay, make sure you do not color in the center part, because that part is a white robe. And so I'm going to pause and color in my black tonsure, and you should do the same thing. Pause me now so that you can color that one in. Okay, so here we have his robe colored in. I'm just going to leave this part white. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to color in his skin on his face and the skin on his hands. He was born in Spain. Okay, so I'm going to finish coloring those in. So I'm going to pause now and finish coloring those in. And he is often pictured with dark brown hair, so we can also fill in his hair and his beard. Okay, so take a second to finish coloring those in. All right, the next two parts that we're going to discuss is why he is pictured with a book and a staff. So this is often recounted to a vision in which St. Peter and St. Paul gave St. Dominic the staff and the books and the scrolls. And they gave him that, and they urged him to go into the world and to preach the Bible and the message of God. And this is often, if you think about, remember how Jesus is our shepherd? This is like a shepherd's crook or a shepherd's cross. And he may have carried that to show who he was. And you'll notice at the top, there's the cross at the top. Okay, so I'm going to take a second, color in this staff. I'm going to keep coloring it in all the way down to the bottom. And I'm going to take a second to color in the books and the scrolls. So you could pause to do that now. A little bit more about the iconography of the books. St. Dominic and the Dominicans, even now, are well known for being very scholarly, which means that they are excellent students, and they attend some of the most rigorous schooling of any priests and nuns in a religious order. And so if you're ever curious, we have a brand new father. We have Father Gregory, and Father Gregory was a brother when many, many years ago when Mrs. Smith first started at St. Dom's. And so he's been studying just almost as long as I've been a teacher in order to become a priest, and he just became one this past weekend. So we offer our blessings to him. So let's take a look up here at the top. We have a star here on his head. So this star is often located here, or sometimes it's located actually on his forehead. And this is another exemplar, extraordinary sign that is attributed to St. Dominic as being blessed by God. During his baptism, when he receives God's presence in him, his grandmother saw a star shine on his head, and that was another sign that he would be a very special man for God in the future. So you'll also notice that there are other stars around the page. That's because St. Dominic is also one of the saints for astronomy. So they often have stars to symbolize the night sky in the picture. Now you'll also notice that he has a halo. So whenever people draw or paint or create saints, especially saint iconography, they make sure to include a halo. And the halo states that they are a saint and also in heaven. Okay, so the last thing I want to add to our paper is actually something we need to write. So you need a pencil. Mrs. Smith, oh, she found hers now. So I'd like you to write down that he formed the order of preachers. Okay, so what we're going to do, oh, I'm sorry, there's one more that I forgot, but so maybe, well, I'll tell you. Next week, we're going to do some writing about St. Dominic. So we want to maybe review some of his iconography to remind us when we're writing next week. So before we move on, though, I want to take a moment to remind you of this certain type of belt that Dominicans wear around their waist. And if you remember, that's not a regular belt. It actually has beads because it's actually a rosary. And the reason why Dominicans wear a rosary and why we honor the rosary as part of St. Dominic's school in October and May is because the rosary was gifted to St. Dominic by the Virgin Mother. She appeared to St. Dominic and she told him that she wanted him to go out into the world and to speak the truth about God and to tell people about Jesus. And she gave him the rosary to help people learn how to pray. So one of the neat things about a rosary is that, number one, most people recognize it. But if you were to say, I'm really struggling with what to think about, what to pray, my teacher always tells me it's time to pray. What do I say? I don't know what to say. The rosary gives you the prayers right there. And you can say the rosary in such a way that the prayers help you to focus on what you're trying to accomplish. Focus on your communication with God. So here we have our icon of St. Dominic de Guzman. I hope you've enjoyed, and we'll learn a little bit more about him next week. See you soon.